Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're here from Safe Landing. It's myself, Dan Todd, and Todd Smith, and we're here to talk to you about an event we've got coming up on the 25th of February at 7 p.m. UK time, and it's a listening circle, which is just really an opportunity for people from within the profession across our community to listen and to hear from each other, particularly with regards to their concerns, their thoughts, their experiences of anything that kind of connects aviation and environmental, climate, sustainability issues. So that's what we're here to talk about. And I thought at this stage, Todd, it might be useful maybe for you to tell us a bit more, particularly for those who are newer to our community or perhaps completely new to our community, a little bit more about Safe Landing and who we are.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So, yeah, my name is Todd. I've been a part of the Safe Landing community since its inception, and yeah, I guess we're a community of aviation workers and we essentially have a vision where we want to live in a world where aviation can flourish in harmony with nature and the beauty of flight can be enjoyed by all and for generations to come. So, yeah, we are a collective of people that still work in the industry. Some like ourselves have left the industry, and and we just really care. We really care about the love of the industry, the love of flying that got us into it, the benefits that aviation can offer people, as well as wanting and needing this transition to an industry where it thrives in harmony with nature, and I'm sure everyone can agree that that's a good thing. We want aviation to continue for future generations, and so within Safe Landing we have three core areas. One which this area falls under is a community element, which I'm a part of, and then we've got Finley in our think tank, and he's very technically minded as a former Rolls-Royce engineer, great on all of the future technology and a lot of the political advocacy stuff that falls under his umbrella as well. And then Mr. Hibbard, George Hibbard, is in our deliberative democracy area, so worker participation, and part of a key part of our strategy is giving power back to people in the industry that have the most to lose, but also the most to gain by an industry that is thriving and can find its way through the turbulence ahead. So yeah, grateful to be here and sharing this space with you, Dan.
Yeah, likewise. It's always nice to kind of have a reminder of yeah, the community at Safe Landing, why we're here, what we do, and I suppose who we're wanting to represent. So a bit of an intro just to ourselves again for anyone who's not familiar with us. Myself, I'm a former pilot. I was a flying instructor, and then I flew with BMI Regional on the Embraer 145 for about 6 years, and then I spent about 5 years with TUI on the 757, 767, and I stopped flying just coming up to 6 years ago now. I absolutely love flying. I am the third generation of pilots in my family. I still do adore everything it brings to the world and the technicalities of it, the sheer magic of it. And at the same time, I felt really conflicted by the impact I knew it was having on the natural world. And for me, I suppose the direction of it. And whilst I wanted to see that change at the same time, the reason I chose to leave was because it didn't sit well. And yet I really want to be part of something that helps that transition because it just brings so much, and it is something that's so special. So it's a little bit about me, Todd. I don't know if you wanted to share, and also maybe then to talk a bit more about the event, the listening circle, and the training that we've
Mm.
done that hopefully we can use and bring to people who want to join us for that.
Sure, Dan, thank you. Yeah, so I used to fly for Thomas Cook Airlines UK. They actually went into liquidation in September 2019. I was medically grounded in 2018, just a few months after I witnessed for the first time sort of the real impacts, the first-hand impacts of both climate change and mass tourism firsthand. I was backpacking in Peru, and it was an opportunity to go to this place called Rainbow Mountain, and it's 100 meters lower than Everest Base Camp, it's about 17,000 feet above sea level. So I was up there, suffering from mild hypoxia, not suffering, but a little bit lightheaded, and getting ready to get down the mountain to get into some more oxygenated air. But whilst up there, yeah, just got hit by this really bittersweet moment that the Peruvian guide was telling me that Peru was one of the first countries to be impacted by the climate crisis, and um, the bittersweetness was that this beautifully coloured rainbow rock formation was only visible because this glacial ice cap in the region had receded so much. There was no snow or ice left at all on this mountain peak. Um, and there was also thousands of people there up and down the hill like ants, and I was one of them, and sort of I was really being impacted by you know one of the one of the ways in which aviation or mass tourism is not serving the earth, and also yeah, seeing an ice cap melt and knowing that so many that I used to fly over in the Alps were, and knowing that the freezing level, which is the altitude at which we reach 0 degrees, is getting higher and higher, and you could just see the impact that was having on the mountains flying over them regularly, and in the Alps, this freezing level getting higher and higher, and just these little glaciers that were left just looking really vulnerable. So yeah, I wanted to be a pilot since I was 5 years old. I was a flying instructor for a couple of years before that, and it was like you, it was an absolute dream for me. My dad was a bricklayer, so certainly it wasn't anything that ran in my family, but everyone was very proud. I was proud of myself, and yeah, I guess having studied climate science whilst I was grounded and trying to get my medical back, it became more and more clear to me that I was really suffering from this inner conflict from what I'd experienced, what I'd witnessed, and that was eating me up inside. Because on the one hand, there was this job which I actually absolutely, was living the best version of my dream since I was 5, and at the same time, all of the places I was seeing from the air and experiencing the cultures through the industry, I was aware that the climate impacts were affecting these countries and cultures that I was building relationship with and falling in love with as well. So yeah, I guess the pandemic was the final straw for me, and I started to understand I was experiencing something that's now understood to be eco anxiety, and that inner conflict that grew. So yeah, that's when shortly after I met you and George as well, and yeah, it was a great turning point to no longer feel alone with that anxiety, and with both those loves for aviation and the earth, so the natural world. So yeah, there's a bit about my story, but I don't fly anymore. I don't feel personally I could emotionally, sort of the thought of sitting in a flight deck and firing up the engines and taking off now is a very different thought and an experience to the one that I used to dream about and love so much. So that's something I'm working on, but yeah, I guess that's why I'm so grateful for these sorts of spaces. And what we recently did with the Climate Psychology Alliance, which is an organisation I've personally I think we've both been connected to for a number of years. I've also been in therapy for 6 years now with someone who has been quite involved in the Climate Psychology Alliance. And so, yeah, there's this concept of Climate Café Listening Circles that they've been pioneering, which actually came out of the Death Cafe movement, I suppose you could call it, where people would come together and talk about the taboo subject that is death. The one thing that we know that we will all encounter at some point, we don't know when, but yet there's a socially constructed silence around it, and for people to come together in circle initially and speak about our own mortality, and there is this sort of, yeah, I mean, when was the last time one of our listeners now was talking to someone about death or their own mortality? It's not something that comes up generally at the dinner table. So yeah, I guess with all of the existential natures of the climate and ecological crises that we're in the midst of, I guess it felt fairly appropriate for the Climate Psychology Alliance to adapt that, for people to come together and to talk about not only our individual mortality, but the potential for our collective mortality. And for many countries, they're already experiencing, mass famines. In Madagascar's experience of climate-induced famine, and how we sort of live with that. Yeah, Dan and I have done some facilitation training to be co-participants in these listening circles, and that's what we're going to be offering to the community on the 25th of February. So yeah, we're just very much looking forward to inviting you along. And if you've never done anything like this before, then to know that it's a sort of safe, confidential space where we can essentially just come together. You're welcome. There's an invitation to bring an object of anything that might mean something significant to you. Could be a stone, could be a feather, could be a natural object, could be a man-made object. But if there's anything particular along with a cup of tea and a brew, just yeah, just come along, and we can sit in circle and just open up a space, which we don't often get in normal life, for us to just slow down slightly, connect to our bodies, connect to our feelings, and to share from the heart. And in my experience of attending these circles and other similar circles, it's been very healing. And yeah, it's nice to know that I don't have to hold any of this alone, because I think it's impossible for any one of us to hold. So yeah,
Thank
that's
you. It's a deeply human and very powerful thing to do, I think. Just to, as you kind of described, sit in circle. And I suppose not that long ago as a species, we'd have done it around a fire. And
yeah.
of course, for so many different reasons, people being in different places, and we often use technology now, but that kind of whether we imagine us sitting around a fire or just in a circle, that it's such a human thing to do, which just doesn't happen very often anymore. People have meetings that have got objectives and agendas and strict time constraints, and people have roles, and there's hierarchies and all this stuff that actually like takes us away from really fundamentally who we are. And so this idea that we're kind of just coming back to that, whilst acknowledging that we exist in the world as it is now. And so there's that power of sort of deep listening, and the honoring, sort of allowing people to share, whether we agree with them or not, whether we hold the same perspective as them or not. There's just an incredible power to it. And I remember when I first attended I've been to a few of these Climate Café listening circles, that the ones that are actually arranged by the Climate Psychology Alliance, who by the way, are a really interesting group of psychologists, psychotherapists, counselors, all sorts of people from backgrounds in those kind of areas, who have a particular interest and alignment and understanding of what's going on, from a climate environmental kind of perspective, that the situation we find ourselves in. So really interesting group of people who've developed this structure, well, not even a structure, I suppose, a practice that they've helped people. And I remember, yeah, going to my first one, and I actually didn't realize that we needed some object. And a lot of people think the idea is you bring an object which is, yeah, perhaps from the natural world, that really kind of makes you think a bit about this amazing planet we live on, and it's just a starting point. So you reflect upon this object, and you just talk around it, and you just see where that goes, and people just listen, and then you move on. And it's like, and I love the fact that you're not responding to someone. You're not listening to them with the idea that I have to say something or solve something or make a point or anything other than just hear them and then share what comes up for me. I didn't know that though, so I didn't have anything from the natural world. So I actually shared this old Thompson 757, and because for me that was the first listening circle I went to, that was such a big part of actually why am I here? Well, the reason that I actually recognized that I cared so deeply about environmental issues was because of an awareness I gathered from learning about the impact of aviation, and initially. And when I learned about the kind of some of the challenges that aviation is faced with, particularly that in a given year only 5% of the world fly, and it contributes maybe 5 or 6% of kind of global heating, and if we include all the non-CO2 warming effects as well, all of a sudden that didn't sit very well. And yet I loved flying. I still do love flying. And so like navigating that conflict was a big part of my story in terms of actually why I care so much about this. And there's a nuance there that, can care about two things at once. So recognizing that there are many people on the world, either in the world who benefit from flying, either because like ourselves previously were employed, and actually depend on it financially, or just because they have family who live in other countries. This is an industry that is deeply important, and yet is one that only serves a small percentage of the world, and it's the ones who aren't served by it who are suffering the most. And that was just a lot to navigate. So it was hard to know what to do with that when I was first recognizing that conflict flying, and it was quite a few years I was still flying while I kind of sat with that conflict. And yeah, like I remember the first conversation I had with you, Todd. It was the first person I'd met who ever kind of felt like perhaps really was at least consciously in that same place. And then, of course, since then, recognizing that there are dozens and dozens more who perhaps hadn't ever said anything until they recognized there were other people too. And that was what was so powerful about this, is that sharing, it didn't solve, that first conversation, the second conversation, or the early kind of sessions we had in the safe landing community before perhaps it was even called safe landing.
Yeah.
It didn't solve anything in the sense that it didn't suddenly take away the conflict. It didn't suddenly give me an answer, but it helped me to get through that initial stumbling block, which is not knowing what to do with that emotion. That it's quite hijacking it, and it literally just is quite sort of paralyzing almost. You don't know what to do next, and you don't even dare talk about it with anyone because you think, well, who am I to talk about environmental issues? When I fly planes for a living, and it eases that, and it's only with that kind of that space, that cognitive capacity, that once you're not hijacked anymore, that literally the blood flow returns to my prefrontal cortex, and I can now think actually about how I want to navigate this. And my choice was to stop flying. And yeah, there are many people out there who, with that, perhaps that ability to process and share, would, I hope, stay within the sector and be a really positive part of what we need to see and the changes that we need. Because we know that there's so many people that depend upon flying, and actually the current trajectory is not one that's going to serve people who work in the sector, let alone, of course, our ability to live on this planet. So yeah, it's just really, I just remember that so clearly. And so I just wanted to, Todd, if you had any kind of reflection on what it's like, I suppose, why do we feel that bringing this kind of concept of a listening circle, the ability for people to just share and hear each other, and really with no other objective, and what for you, perhaps from your experience, why that's so powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I mean, there's so many spaces nowadays where you can get into a to and fro discussion on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever it is, with a colleague or someone in the industry or anyone, and it just doesn't. We could open up a space and we could have a debate, and we could talk about facts and statistics and science and all the rest of it. But there's something that very, very different about this for me, where we're inviting the feeling. Primarily, we want to stay with how it feels, and we don't want to get into the sort of rational understanding so much. We just want to know what it feels like. And I know from my experience, you know, as a pilot, it's quite taboo to talk about mental health generally. Um, we have very strict medicals, and a lot of people sort of expect us to be superhuman in some ways. That we've got all these lives in our hands, and yet we are still fundamentally flawed because we're human beings. We're going to make mistakes, and that's actually a key part of our training, is how to mitigate for being human, knowing that we will make mistakes, knowing that we have psychological needs and ways in which certain things impact us. So I guess it's trying to what these circles could offer people still working in industry in any capacity is a place to feel less isolated, because I know that in 2018, when I first started to understand what was happening, and that depth of understanding and depth of feeling associated with that understanding grew, I didn't know who to turn to. I tried sharing sort of Guardian articles about climate change with colleagues, and that didn't go down so well. And I think from my own experience, there's a lot of defenses that I noticed in me because I had wanted to be a pilot since I was 5 years old, and to sort of fully accept the fact that my industry was both one I loved and also one that has the potential to cause a lot of harm or is causing harm. It got my defenses up. I didn't want to admit it. There was a cognitive dissonance, which is something that's also paradoxically part of our training, and um, and so you can sort of kid yourself, and I did. I stayed in denial for a couple of years. I think I sort of flirted with the idea that this was real, but I didn't want to fully accept it, and so, yeah, I think just the ability to come together with like-minded people, because I think it's understood that actually all of us are experiencing a form of eco-anxiety. It's deep in our subconscious for most people. There's this very background sort of awareness that perhaps things are not quite right and things are maybe getting worse. You're seeing more extreme weather events, sort of more pollution. They're experiencing more pollution, or they're hearing of people, young girl in London dying of asthma, for instance, related to pollution. And so, yeah, there's this sort of background, again, this socially constructed silence where, even for me now, that's been working in this space, talking about climate change for a number of years, it still feels taboo, for me to bring it up at the dinner table. And so, yeah, I hope that people watching this or that feel brave enough to come along to one of our listening circles will really reap the benefits of just having that space to stay with some of the feelings and to just acknowledge something which is undoubtedly already there in us, um, because we're dependent on the Earth's life support systems, in the same way we are in the flight deck, in the cabin. We If there's a system malfunction with our life support systems, then of course that's going to impact our psychology in some way. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to building more community, and there's many peer support groups and all sorts of wonderful initiatives within the industry where, and over the years it's got more and more acceptable and encouraged for people to speak about their mental health and to not push it underground. So I hope this is just another one of those
Mm.
offerings that allow people to sort of to come along and to know that it's okay to have emotions. Actually, it makes you very human.
Yeah.
What do you
And I like the
reckon?
way you kind of linked it to stuff that we actually do learn about. Aviation in some ways is unusual, the extent of the understanding and the application of human factors, and how normalized actually that's become when it's linked to flight safety. So, for
Mm,
example, a big part of a pre-flight briefing now will often involve a recognition if one of the crew members is feeling really tired or actually, is feeling kind of under pressure because they're running late. It's quite common now for one of the crew or both to kind of acknowledge that and say, yeah, God, I really
mm,
feel like I'm chasing my tail right now. And like, if they might say something like, if I do something that looks a bit doesn't seem right, just let me know because I'm definitely feeling that. So on the one hand, when
yeah.
it's for flight safety, that's become quite normalized, and it's taken a long time for that to become ingrained within the culture of aviation. In the same way, as you say, we've become as an industry very well trained to recognize cognitive bias. Like I always think of the Air Transat Airbus A330 that ran out of fuel over the Atlantic. Understandably, in that situation, the captain resorted to default mode, which is look for reasons why we aren't running out of fuel because it's really inconvenient to be running out of fuel. And then obviously kept checking again, check the computers. It must be the computer. And of course, eventually, when one of the engines stopped, turns out they really were running out of fuel. And so as a result of what's been learned from events like that, aviation is quite unusual in the sense that people are trained to recognize sort of forms or moments where we might be affected by confirmation bias, for example, and have to actively intervene to make sure that we look for reasons why we might have a fuel leak rather than just do what our brain does and look for reasons why we probably why we don't. Because for flight safety, it makes sense, and yet actually it's harder to apply that a lot of what we learn in that sense, whether it's about acknowledging vulnerability emotionally, physically, or whether it's about mitigating for our cognitive limitations as a species. Harder to do that. And actually that was being involved in CRM and human factors training was, I think, one of the things that kind of really got me thinking. And I think, I like the way you described something earlier, like you kind of I think to some extent, a lot of people are being affected by this, even if it's not conscious. The way I
Mm.
think I kind of recognized I had this itch I couldn't scratch for years. And it was often associated with when I was signing fuel bills and recognized, we were burning 20 tons of fuel. I never quite realized why that didn't quite feel right. And when I was initially presented with facts around climate science, I was doing exactly what the captain of the Airbus over the Atlantic did. I was looking for reasons to confirm why it's okay. And actually, it took a while to kind of say, okay, well, what if I look through a lens that says, metaphorically, why might we be running out of fuel? Rather than for looking for reasons why we're not. And all that did was meant that I consciously then became aware of the fact that is something that doesn't sit well. And actually, eco-anxiety is one of the things that a lot of psychologists have recognized is it's a proportionate response to an existential threat.
Yeah.
Especially when I say existential, I'm not necessarily only talking about the impact on our ability to live on the planet. Existential for me was also the threat that I felt in terms of how much I love flying. I didn't want it to
Mm.
not be okay, and it's not as simple as flying not being okay, and at the same time recognizing that clearly the way we approach the consumption of fossil fuels and flying is something that needs to change, both for environmental reasons and for the viability of the secure job security of everyone in the sector. And I think going there, that you kind of linked it to mental health, the ability to process that and share that in a safe space was fundamental. And it's hard to know how much that anxiety would have built and ultimately what impact that would have had I not had that opportunity. And it kind of made me think a bit, Todd, about like maybe I'm sure there are different people in our community or new to our community in different places. And some people may be hearing it thinking, yeah, actually that's me. Like maybe they were like, yeah, I didn't realize perhaps that what was bothering me, and hearing that, yes, I'm aware of that now. But it might not be. Some people might be hearing this going, like, I'm not sure that I feel that. I'm aware of climate science. I don't deny it. We know that some people do. Um, but actually there is a consensus, a really, really strong consensus now of what's going on in terms of burning fossil fuels. So people are aware of it, and we know that
Mm.
the general population, generally the vast majority of people, are actually concerned about it. Yet a lot of people might be saying, I don't feel this anxiety, and I don't have a particular sense that, I think anything needs to change drastically. So how does this circle work for them? Because if we're kind of, I feel like, it might seem obvious to someone who feels very clearly that I have this strong emotional response that I want to share. But what I've also noticed at climate cafes is that sometimes people come and they don't have that.
Mm.
They just they've recognized that for some reason they're aware of what's going on environmentally. They're not quite sure how that's landing for them.
Mm.
And it's not until they sit in that circle, they hear other people talking and they share what's coming up for them, that they realize the value in just sharing that. So I'm just
Yeah.
wondering what you think about that and who this might apply to. Are we kind of reaching out to people that sort of explicitly and know that they experience this eco anxiety, or are we actually saying no? There's a whole spectrum of people who could really benefit from the chance to share and to hear.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Dan. I just wanted to touch firstly on something you said earlier about the eco-anxiety being a proportionate response. And I would say yes, and also a healthy response in my experience. Actually being able to acknowledge where we are emotionally, and I have no shame in saying I've cried multiple occasions and grieved at the loss that we've already experienced. 70% of the wildlife has declined in, I think, since 1970. Yeah, and also, just connecting to that grief. Um, I've lost my trail of thought, but what the question you was asking me was about people that might not yet be, yes, people that might not yet be connected to this emotionally, and just to say that like it's a very welcome acknowledgement in a listening circle that you are not feeling anything.
Mm.
And that in and of itself, that numbness is actually a really insightful recognition, because we live in a society, in my own experience, I was conditioned not to feel things, so busy, you know, chasing money, paying off the debts, whatever, just like the next distraction, as long as I'm not sort of slowing down and feeling, because in my experience, it's actually quite scary
Mm.
to feel some of the emotions. But in also my experience, the reality of feeling emotionally what it's like to live in the world that we live in, and to be on the trajectory that we're on without sugarcoating it, actually connecting to that, it feels like it's allowed me to take um, what they call in Zen Buddhism right action, which is it's an action of it's a grounded action. And just to add, I started off this call by saying a bit about safe landing, and I think initially, you know, one of the criticisms that I have and we have as a team is that we focus so much on the problems of aviation and what it was doing wrong, that in recent years we've really sort of fallen back in love with aviation, and and through processing a lot of this, we've realized how important that love is for aviation as well. And a big part of the work that we do now is on the positive vision for the future, because in my experience, until you can really emotionally connect, accept, and you know experience the world as it is now, then we can't move towards a different trajectory, a different future. That point in the flight where we're experiencing that master warning, there's something impacting the safety of all passengers on board. We have to run through the mental model of like, diagnose the situation. What is the situation? Let's look at it objectively, but free from bias. And then once we've fully accepted the situation, admittedly, we don't have time in that moment to sit there and process it emotionally, but we are at least able to sort of step into action, right action, not from a sort of incapacitated, overly stressed response, but from a um, you know, congruent, aligned response where we can actually have half a chance of staying calm enough and thinking clear
Mm.
enough to ensure a safe landing. So,
Yeah, thank you.
um,
It kind of loops, sort of brings, it feels like it's kind of gone full circle back to kind of, yeah, who we are, what we do, and particularly more recently, the direction that's really felt right in terms of bringing a community together of people who either work in the sector or really deeply connected, love aviation, and I think that's that word, not but, and really want to see change that's really needed for for our ability to live on this amazing planet, and for the future, the job security of the sector. So, um, and I suppose just to reiterate kind of what we were kind of referencing there, which is this is really open to anyone that's hearing this thinking like, yeah, like I'd be really interested to hear what this is like for a load of other people in this community. And I'm not sure what I'd say. And the thing is, if that's the case when it comes to you, you don't actually have to say anything. And you never know. It's just so hard to know until you get there actually what will come up and how valuable that could be. So yeah, it's welcome to everyone. Bring a brew. Todd, any final details? I feel like in amongst this, there was going to be one thing where like we were supposed to share something. I think we've talked about the date, 25th of Feb, time,
yeah,
7 p.m. UK. It's
yeah.
called the Safe Landing Listening Circle. What else have I missed?
It's a 90-minute session. You can bring an object if you wish. You don't have to, but just bringing yourselves and your presence is all that's required. And yeah, if we've missed anything else, you can check out the description, the link in this post on whatever platform you're receiving this. And yeah, thanks for bearing with us, and staying with us. You got this far, whoever you are. And if you're new, you're even more welcome. Everyone's welcome, but we really want to, you know, build community, because that's something we can tangibly do, and through building a strong, resilient community of people that care both about aviation and the trajectory we're on, I do think we can collectively achieve something. Um, I think currently unimaginable based on the trajectory we're on. So
Mm.
stay with us. Hopefully, see you there on the 25th or a listening circle in the future. And also, if there's anyone watching this that may be aware of any airlines, aviation companies, unions, peer support groups that would really benefit from this space, we'd love for you to reach out to us, and we'd love to offer that because I do. From my own experience, I think it's a wonderful thing. If you've never tried one and you likely haven't, then do come along, and look forward to seeing you there.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Todd. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Yeah, and we do hope to see as many of you there as possible. If you've got any questions, please do reach out.